Hello, lovers of the strange and the spooky, and welcome back to the channel. Grab a warm drink and get comfortable, because tonight's investigation is going to make you think twice about exploring forgotten places. We've covered deep deserts, underground tunnels, and stormy seas. But there is a very specific type of dread reserved for places that were originally built for joy, only to be left to rot. Today, we are heading deep into the suffocating, moss-draped swamps of the American South. If you dive into urban exploration forums, you will constantly see warnings about the abandoned amusement parks hidden deep in the Louisiana Bayou. As a female creator who is obsessed with the paranormal, I realized I've never talked about the unique horror of overgrown, decaying theme parks. So tonight, we are exploring a place entirely swallowed by Spanish moss and swamp water. Imagine a rusted Ferris wheel looming over black, stagnant water and old carnival games sinking into the mud. There is no cell service. The humidity is suffocating, and the nearest town is an hour away through unpaved swamp roads. Our story takes place in the decaying ticket booth of one of these forgotten parks. This account revolves around a young man named Julian, and it perfectly illustrates why locals have strict rules about the bayou after dark. Before we get into the terrifying details, if you love abandoned mysteries and dark folklore, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. Our story begins with Julian. He was a university student in New Orleans who was struggling to pay his tuition. Desperate for a job that would let him study while earning cash, he accepted a position as a night watchman at an abandoned 1950s-era amusement park located deep in the swamplands. The property had been closed for decades, and the owners just needed someone to sit in the front guard shack to deter teenagers and urban explorers from trespassing. When Julian arrived for his first shift at dusk, the atmosphere of the sinking park was incredibly heavy. The humidity clung to his skin, and the isolation was immediate. The property manager, an older local named Mr. Thibodeau, handed Julian a heavy flashlight and the keys to the guard shack. "Listen to me carefully, son," Thibodeau warned, his expression deadly serious. "You stay in the shack, and you keep the door locked. Sometime around 2 a.m., the old carousel at the center of the park might light up and start spinning. Do not leave the shack to investigate. Do not go try to pull the power breaker. And whatever you do, do not look at the people riding the horses." Julian gave a nervous smile, assuming the old man was just trying to scare the new guy. Thibodeau didn't smile back. He simply got into his truck and drove away, leaving Julian completely alone in the sprawling, decaying park. For the first few hours, Julian tried to focus on his textbooks, but the environment was deeply unsettling. The air smelled of rotting wood and stagnant swamp water. The darkness outside the shack's dusty windows was absolute, completely hiding the rusted rides just a few hundred feet away. As the night deepened, the temperature suddenly plummeted, bringing a thick, unnatural fog rolling in from the swamp. Julian checked his watch. It was exactly 2 a.m. He was reading at the desk when the darkness outside his window was suddenly broken by a glowing, warm light. Julian stood up and looked out the dirty glass. Deep in the center of the park, glowing through the thick fog, the massive vintage carousel had illuminated. Hundreds of yellow bulbs were glowing perfectly, completely defying the fact that the park's electrical grid had been disconnected for 30 years. He could see the massive structure slowly beginning to rotate. Julian's heart raced. His immediate instinct was to go turn it off, assuming some trespassers had brought a generator and started the ride. But Thibodeau's deadly serious warning echoed in his mind. Do not leave the shack to investigate. However, human curiosity overpowered his fear. Believing he needed to chase off teenagers, Julian grabbed his heavy flashlight, unlocked the shack, and stepped out into the thick fog. As he walked closer to the center of the park, the air grew freezing cold. The carousel was spinning at a dizzying speed, the vintage Carnival music playing a warped, distorted melody that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. Julian stopped at the edge of the ride, his flashlight beam cutting through the mist. That was when he realized he wasn't looking at teenagers. Sitting on the intricately painted wooden horses were figures. There were dozens of them. They were wearing faded, tattered clothing from the 1950s, entirely soaked with thick swamp water. Their heads were bowed, their bodies swaying unnaturally as the carousel spun round and round. Julian froze in absolute terror. He remembered the final rule: do not look at the people riding the horses. As the ride continued to spin, the figure on the closest horse slowly turned its head to face Julian. Its skin was bloated, grayish-green, and deteriorating from decades submerged in dark water. But the most horrifying part was its face. It had no eyes, just hollow dark voids, and its mouth was stretched open in an impossible, silent scream of agony. Julian was paralyzed. Suddenly, the carousel ground to an abrupt halt. The lights flickered. The entity nearest to him slowly slid off its wooden horse. It stood up on the overgrown pavement. Its limbs were bent at unnatural angles, and it began to walk toward Julian with a jerky, disjointed movement, its head twitching from side to side. Panic finally broke through Julian's paralysis. He dropped his flashlight and bolted blindly through the fog, sprinting desperately back toward the guard shack. He threw himself inside, slamming the heavy wooden door shut and throwing the deadbolt just in time. Seconds later, a massive impact struck the outside of the door, shaking the entire shack. Julian backed away, trembling violently. Another heavy impact hit the wall, followed by the terrifying realization that the entity was dragging its decaying hands across the exterior windows. Julian threw himself under the desk, pressing his hands tightly over his ears and squeezing his eyes shut. For the rest of the night, the entity circled the small building. It peered through the dirty glass with those empty, hollow eyes, mimicking the voices of drowning victims pleading for help. Julian stayed curled on the floor, weeping silently, praying for the sun to rise. The next morning, Mr. Thibodeau found Julian unresponsive under the desk. The young man's eyes were wide and vacant, his clothes soaked in a cold sweat. The exterior of the guard shack was covered in thick mud and deep, unnatural scratches. As Thibodeau carefully walked the traumatized student back to his truck, he looked out toward the rusted carousel and sighed heavily. "I told you not to look at them, boy," Thibodeau muttered softly. Back in 1955, a massive flash flood hit this bayou in the middle of a summer night. The park filled with water in minutes. A group of people got trapped on that carousel, screaming for help as the swamp swallowed them whole. Their spirits never left the ride. If you work out here, you learn the rule, you let them ride in the dark. That boy didn't follow the rule, and he almost joined them in the mud. And that is going to wrap up tonight's investigation, my friends. There is something deeply unsettling about places of childhood joy becoming eternal traps for something sinister. The sheer isolation of the bayou is scary enough, without adding waterlogged entities to the mix. I know a lot of these local legends are passed around to keep kids out of dangerous, abandoned properties, but the amount of urban explorers who refuse to ever return to the Louisiana swamps makes you wonder what is truly hiding out there in the fog. If this story gave you chills, please do me a massive favor and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that you enjoy these dark dives and helps our little community grow. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss a new nightmare. Stay curious. Never investigate lights in an abandoned park. Stay out of the dark, and I will see you all in the next video.